Hey guys, it's Jake. Today I want to tell you a little bit about my first tournament experience. So just this past Halloween, I played my first tournament. I played the Hop and Barrels Haunting at the Preserve in Clearwater, Minnesota, at the Airborne Preserve. I don't know if you guys watched the tour at all this year, but that was one of the stops. Um, yeah, so I've been a member since 2011 at the PDGA, and I'm just now getting around to playing my first ever tournament. And so I figured it'd be a great opportunity for me to, kind of lay out what I experienced, any of my thoughts and takeaways, and hopefully that'll help anybody else that's out there thinking about trying out, tournament play for their first time, or maybe other folks will have some tips for me for the future. Yeah, so let's get into it. The Haunting at the Preserve. For those that don't know, the Airborne Preserve is two courses. There's one called the Lynx, which is a little bit shorter and arguably easier, and then the Timberwolf, which is the longer, more difficult of the two courses. So this tournament was one round on each course over the course of a single day. So we played one in the morning and one in the afternoon on Halloween. And the entire event spanned the weekend, where you could do like glow disc on Friday, and there was a doubles tournament on Sunday. But the main tournament that I was entering was on Saturday. It was a B tier. Um, so there was 163 people that signed up for the tournament, and in my division, intermediate, there was 54 people. I decided to go with intermediate because I've got no PDGA ratings, so I don't really know where I fall. But I looked at some of the scores from the Earth Day event that was taken at the Preserve, and I have played the Preserve. At that point, I played it twice, I think. So I had a rough idea of how I score on a good day. So I just kind of went with that as a guideline and put myself into intermediate, which seemed to be a pretty good choice, actually. Um, so it was, I think, $60 to enter, and just went on to the disc golf scene website and filled out the form, and I think you PayPal the money to, I believe, the tournament director. I don't even remember. It's been a while. It was done a while ago, but it was easy, very simple process. And then it was just a matter of waiting for details to come out. In this case, the event was pretty much all done through Facebook. So, and the Airborne Preserve has its own Facebook events page. So I was just waiting for information to come through there, and then the night before the tournament, Friday night, they posted the cards and who was starting on which hole, shotgun start. Um, and so we had all that information, and they decided not to do a players meeting or anything. You just showed up at the hole on time, and pick up your players pack beforehand, and just start the day. Since there's very little daylight at this point in Minnesota, we wanted to use the window of time we had with decent weather and light and temperature to the best of our ability. So it worked out pretty well. I knew where I had to go and what time I needed to be there. Overall, I would say the organization was pretty solid. It's obviously not as like super well run as some other like development conferences and things that I've been to, but I think that's to be expected in the disc golf world. I don't know that, unless you're talking about the real top tier tournaments, I don't know that they're ever going to be as ridiculously over organized as maybe other types of get togethers in the world. I think disc golfers in general we're pretty laid back, go with the flow kind of group. So I feel like that kind of bleeds into the organizational and management style of what I've heard, at least from most of tournaments. Obviously, I've only played in one, so I don't have much experience with that. But from what I've heard, it's pretty similar across the board. No one's ever really going to get lost, but you're definitely not going to get bombarded with information necessarily uh, before the tournament. So yeah, it was pretty nice. I'm trying to think if there's any other issues I had prior to the tournament. I think it was pretty clear. We went and played the first round on the links. The pros start, or sorry, the opposite. We started on the Timberwolf, the harder course, in the morning. The pros started on the links, and then we flipped in the afternoon and we moved over to the Lynx and they moved to the Timberwolf. And the conditions were decent. The week leading up to the tournament, it had snowed, and we were actually thinking there might be some snow on the ground. But thankfully, the temperatures got up into the upper 40s, I want to say, a couple days beforehand, and took care of most of that snow. So it was, yeah, it was a little chilly. I want to say started around 30 degrees, and it was closing in on 50, I want to say, by 3 o'clock. It was, you know, decent temperature, right? Not warm, but playable. So conditions were all right. The thing that really was noticeable was the wind. So the morning round, it was windy. It was probably 15 miles an hour or something like that, but nothing, outside the realm of usual playing conditions, I guess. However, the second round got really windy. Like we're talking 30, 35 mile an hour and gusty. Like it was rough, and it definitely showed in a lot of the scores on the second half of the day. Um, so personally, my first round went really well. I shot, I think it was four over. Yeah, four over. I think on the first round, which at the time was rated as a 913. Um, and then moving into the second half of the day, I shot a three over, which ended up being a 940 rated at the time. The funny thing, though, is that it ended up flipping when they actually did all the calculations later on. They rated the first round a 942 and the second one a 919, and that's probably due to the fact that the pros were playing the opposite course, and then the wind conditions shifted. So, yeah, the ratings, I guess, are questionable, but I guess either way, they kind of come out to the same thing, and I ended up getting my first PDGA rating at a 931, which I was super happy about. Finished fifth overall, tied for fifth in the tournament. Had a chance at third, but totally botched the last hole. Ended up putting one in the drink and taking the extra stroke, which knocked me down a couple. But it was a blast. A lot of fun. The first card was about the most fun I could have imagined coming into a tournament. I got placed with a group of five. Only, I think, two or three of the people in the group, I want to say, had played tournament before. So a lot of us newbies, nobody was like super good or anything. So it was just super relaxed. A lot of fun. It was just like playing, around with your friends. So I was really, really happy with that. And the second round, not that it was, not fun or anything, but I had moved up to the chase card at that point. So it was definitely a lot more focused, and people were really, trying to do really well. So there was a lot less of that sort of, I don't want to say fun, but relaxed atmosphere. It was a little bit more tense, but it was still a really fun card. Everybody was, still, conversing and having a good time. Um, so that was really cool. But yeah, it just blew me away how similar it was to the way I normally play. And I was expecting this whole situation to be so much more, I don't know, stressful, anxiety ridden, very like expected this super hyper competitive focused group, which is why I wasn't sure if I would enjoy tournament play. I was expecting it to be very, very, I don't know, business, a lot less fun. And that was 100% not the case. It was exactly like I would normally play disc golf, honestly. Um, so I guess to kind of get into what that means, so the things you usually hear about tournaments is that like the pace of play is really slow. And while I agree it's slow, I think for me it was very similar to the way I normally play. Like me and my friends have never been the type that go out, with three discs and a beer and are all chucking at the same time and screwing around and not really paying attention. Like we've always played it like, I won't say seriously, but we followed the rules, right? Like, we're gonna tee up in the order that we're supposed to. We're gonna wait for people to make their shots. We're not gonna be making a bunch of loud noises while they're throwing. We're taking our time on our putts. Not to the point we're not laying down minis or anything, but like our pace of play, I guess, is not that different than it was in the tournament. So for me, it was not a huge transition. I was felt very at home with the way it was being played. I can see how that would be very hard if you're used to a much more casual style. But yeah, for me, it was great. Um, we didn't end up having to wait much, which is another thing I was kind of wondering if we were going to have, if there'd be a whole bunch of backups, especially that we were in a group of five. I thought we'd have a bunch of people up behind us. But we really didn't have much of a wait. I brought along a stool so that I could, chill and wait if we had to, but I only used it maybe 5, 6 times. I highly recommend bringing one anyway. It was super nice to be able to sit basically anywhere and not have to sit in the cold, wet ground, especially when it was still wet from some of the snow. So that was totally worth bringing. Um, but yeah, it was everything flowed really smoothly. Everybody was super nice. Like if you tell them it's your first tournament, everybody wants to help you out. Like nobody wants to see you fail. So it's really really great. You can't. I just can't tell you enough how much you need to try this out and see what it's like because it's absolutely not what I had pictured. Um, and honestly, I expected tournament nerves. I personally didn't notice any different. I felt completely comfortable playing the whole time. And honestly, with the way I ended up finishing, I'm probably going to bump up to advanced next time because I know that I can improve my score if I just, do a couple of things here and there, like not even really having to work too hard, not too much extra field work. So yeah, I think I'm going to be very happy to rack up a few more tournaments, quite a few more tournaments, hopefully next year, assuming COVID doesn't cause more problems. But yeah, highly recommended. Um, let's see what else. I guess as far as tips go, I think there's a couple of things that I picked up from this. One is know how to play in the conditions. I'm personally used to playing in pretty crappy conditions for a couple of reasons. The first being that when I first started playing, I couldn't stop playing. So, regardless of how crappy the weather was, I was going out. Like, I just had to throw plastic. That was just what was happening. So, I got used to throwing in wind and, crappy light rain and things like that. So, um, that was very easy. And then also now that I've got, kids and job and family, all this other stuff that takes up so much of my time, I have a very limited window that I can use for my disc golf, which makes it that much more important to just plow through and play if I have the opportunity. So I still, if it's 25 miles an hour wind out there, most people are like, maybe we'll play tomorrow. For me, it's like, I don't get to play tomorrow, so I'm playing today. So that helped me a lot. I actually knew what my equipment would do in those conditions, and I knew how to handle it. And I thought that was probably the most obvious thing, especially on the second round, is so many of those people that came out and just had no clue what to do with that wind. And whether that's because they don't play in it or they don't understand how their equipment works in it or whatnot, I'm not sure. But you'd see a lot of people that just didn't have the discs they needed. They didn't have anything overstable enough to throw into that headwind, or they had no idea how the disc was going to react when they did throw it into the headwind. Um, and it's likewise with the tailwind. It makes a difference. It's not just crosswinds and putting and things like that. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. And on top of that, being cold and wet, there's just a lot of things that if you're not used to it, if you're just a fair weather player, that can really bite you in a tournament because you don't get to push it to the next day, right? So that was really critical. I think if you have the opportunity, even if it's just if it gets super windy one day, you don't necessarily have to go play around necessarily, but just go out into a field and throw your discs and see what they do, just so you at least have some idea if you ever get in that situation. Highly recommend it. Another thing I would do is, like I said, it was super fun, but there was two different fields on the cards that I played, and I think that's super important to keep in mind. You got to kind of read the room on your card. If somebody really is focused in, you don't want to distract them from their game. Even if you're, having a good time and joking around with other people on the card, you need to make sure that you're not messing with someone else's game, and just being cognizant of the people around you. Some cards is, everybody's gonna be more than willing to just chat and talk and do, whatever, and then others, I assume, will be very quiet and very reserved. And I think it's just important that you pay attention to that and make sure that you're not just trying to force everyone to your comfort level. Um, Thankfully, I didn't really have to deal with that. There was maybe one person I think that was getting a little bit more focused towards the end of the second round because they were struggling a little bit. And I just tried to make sure that I wasn't being too chatty while they were getting ready to throw next or whatever. Give them a little extra space and time to think. And they had headphones in, so it wasn't too big of a deal. But that's just something I think I can totally see people not realizing what's going on. um, and yeah, you just kind of gotta get a feel for what's going on your card and how to approach communicating and interacting with your card mates. Um, some other tips. Definitely, these ones are pretty common, but bring snacks. It's it would suck to be sitting out in the middle of a round and starving and thinking about that while you're trying to play. The stool was fantastic. I love that thing. I would bring it every time. Um, Even without backups, it was just nice to be able to have a spot to sit while you're waiting to tee off, because a lot of these courses aren't going to have seats for you. A huge one for this particular event, and I assume most fall and spring, early spring events, those little handheld heater pack things are amazing. I got the little disposable, you shake them up in the air and they stay hot for like 10 hours or some ridiculous thing. They were amazing. I originally was going to use gloves and just take the one off my throwing hand, but it was just obnoxious to have. I tried it for a practice round and it was just obnoxious. Whereas I just, in my pockets, I kept one on each side as well as a towel on each side, and it was perfect. My hands stayed warm, they stayed dry, and I absolutely, the best thing I think that I learned was to bring those guys. And actually, moving forward, I'm not going to use those because living in Minnesota, it's cold a lot. So I'd go through a lot of those disposable heater packs. So I've got this little guy here that I ordered that I'm going to be trying out. It's an electric heater that goes in your pocket and does the same kind of thing, but it's rechargeable and whatever. So I'm going to see how it works, and if it turns out to be as nice as it seems like it is, I'll maybe do a review on how that is later. But for sure, just having the little heater is super nice, as well as, like I mentioned, the towels. Got to have the towels, and a lot of towels. I have one in each pocket, one for mud, one for water, and then in my bag some extras so that if those got saturated, I could flop them out. And again, also in the car, because I was doing 2 rounds on the same day, I had backup towels, backup discs, all kinds of stuff, backup shoes and socks, everything in the car, just for peace of mind, right? Um, let's see. Oh, UDisc. So the way we were scoring everything was through the PDGA's little app or whatever. But since I wasn't the scorekeeper, um, I decided to also track my scores in UDisc, mainly because I wanted the advanced stats to go back to look at, because whatever, stat nerd. Um, but it actually was really helpful because you get to the end of the round and you have to verify your scorecard. I could easily compare my score to that which was on the scorecard, and see if there's any discrepancies, which is you don't want to screw that up. So that's probably not only for the extra detail if you are doing advanced scoring in UDisc, but also just for that peace of mind to make sure you got your score right. I'd recommend recording that as well. A huge thing that I did, and this is uh, thanks to, I mean, there's been so many people who have done this now, and probably before, but Brody Smith and Paul Macbeth had those videos where they were doing their practice rounds and talking. I don't know if it was in those videos or in the Foundation podcast or whatever, but they were talking about prepping, taking caddy notes and things, and then going out and throwing multiple lines on the course to do those practice rounds, not scoring rounds, but just practicing different shots. That was super, super helpful. Me and a buddy went up there before the tournament, and we not only did we play the course, we did it as a scoring round, but we were also throwing extra shots. Try the forehand, try the backhand, see if I end up over here, what kind of approach can I use? Try putting from a few different spots. A lot of that stuff, just to get a feel for what could happen, and that left me feeling way more confident. On top of that, I was taking caddy notes. I had a Bushnell rangefinder from years and years ago that I brought along, and I lasered out a few key parts of the course, and I marked them all up in just a Google Doc. So I had a hole by hole breakdown of certain distances, discs that I liked and had tried on each of the holes. Um, I looked at it and just, I had the distance and whether I was going to attack that hole for the birdie or if I was going to try to settle for a par. I basically built an entire game plan um, into this Google Doc um, and used that as my guide while I was playing the round. I didn't have to refer to it too much at that time. I'd been through it enough times. It was just sort of in your head, but just getting it down was key. And in the second round, obviously, I didn't get to stick to that game plan too much with all the crazy wind. Sort of threw most of that out the window. But just knowing when you step up to the tee that I don't have to think about which of these 5 discs I'm going to throw. I don't have to wonder how many yards it is, or feet, I guess, for this particular hole or to that particular tree that I know I can maybe get to. Just having that stuff figured out ahead of time was critical to being able to just focus and stay in the game and not worry. It also helped me think stroke by stroke. I think it's very easy to, if you start getting on a good run or a bad run, like you think about the previous shots. And I think to do well, especially in a competitive situation, you need to be thinking about the current thing you're doing, the current shot you're taking, the throw, not even the score on the hole yet, much less the previous however many holes, just that particular throw that you're making. And I think that having that game plan makes it very easy to focus on just that individual shot, because I can be like, oh, I know I need to pick up a Tesla and I need to throw it to that spot. I'm not worried about, oh, I'm behind by X amount of strokes, I need to try something crazy to get a little extra distance. That just doesn't even come into play. It just makes it very easy to stick to the shots that are high percentage shots, which, that flexibility, you need that when you get really far. The pros, they need to be able to make those changes on the fly to pick up those extra birdies. But in my case, playing at the amateur level that I'm at, I'm literally shooting for par at this point. So it's going to do me a lot more good to have a consistent game than it will be to try to extend myself to pick up more birdies to try to catch up, right? I'm stemming the bleeding, not looking to make drastic changes to get hero shots and stuff. So yeah, I think that's just so key, that sort of scouting ahead of time and thinking about your game and how you're going to do things and getting it down on paper, as well as packing everything and getting that a packing list together and having it ready to go the day before, things like that, so that you're thinking so much less on the day of the tournament. You're just enjoying yourself. You're doing what you know how to do. Makes it way easier than I couldn't imagine coming into a blind course, trying to think if I remember to grab everything. Just I would be completely frazzled. Some people that's perfectly fine. I love to get super detailed and get data and have a plan. That's just my personality type. So for me, it was just critical. But yeah, so that was the biggest thing that I think that I'm going to take to the next tournaments moving forward. Is I'm going to keep up that process. I guess the last tip I want to throw out there is to make sure you have backups, especially on a course like the Preserve where there's water everywhere. I know from the first couple times I played it that I lose discs constantly there. I put them in the water all the time. That course hates me. But having those backups, some in the bag, but even just in the car, having a bunch of backups, is such peace of mind that if you do dunk one, you're not going to be stuck throwing mids and putters the whole rest of the tournament because your main drivers are gone. So, yeah, that's another. I saw a buddy of mine actually played with, ended up losing a lot of discs, and it really affected his game, I think, in the second round, which is unfortunate. But yeah, you definitely want to avoid having to think about those kinds of problems, I think. So those are sort of the key things that I learned here from my first tournament. I'm hoping to pick up a lot more information as I keep playing them. And hopefully you folks out there are going to have even more tips for me. So last thing I want to talk about is, for those who've never played a tournament, what happens at the end. So we went to the clubhouse after the second round, and there was an award ceremony. In this situation, they gave they announced the winner of each division, and then basically they didn't say exactly how many places paid out, but afterwards we went into the clubhouse and they gave out gift cards for the amateurs to go buy stuff from the pro shop. So I guess to start with, when we got there, there's the players pack, so you could pick up one thing from the pro shop, basically whatever you wanted, a shirt, a hat, a disc, whatever. And I ended up picking up this awesome Airborne hat. That was my players pack item. But then at the end, you get a gift card. In this particular tournament, you got a gift card that went towards the pro shop, and they had all their stuff there, so you could go pick up more stuff. And I went and picked up a bunch of discs because they had a ton of MVP stuff that nobody was looking at, which is both sad and amazing for me. So, yeah, I guess I was going to show off what I managed to pick up. So I ended up, for 5th place, I got $100 in pro shop credit. And one of the things I grabbed was a Glow Nova. For a buddy. He didn't end up being able to stick around and pick up his prize, so I just grabbed one for him because I didn't see any other discs that I really wanted at the time, and so I figured I'd hook him up with that. So I don't have that to show you, but it was a cool King of the North Glow stamped Nova, which I don't know. I picked that thing up, and I have no idea how people throw those things with the little nubs on the bottom. It just super deep. No thanks. But it was cool to be able to get that for him. So the first disc that I picked up was this sweet cotton candy colored Photon. So I leaned really heavily on, I have another Cosmic Neutron Photon like this, that's max weight, that I used for all of my headwind driving and skip shots and forehands, especially in that second round. And because these things are so beefy. I don't know what it is about the Cosmic Neutron that makes them so much beefier, but man alive, these things are just meat hooks. But not to the point where they're useless. Like, I have a flare that is very, very overstable, but to the point where it's a very rare use utility driver because it's just so overstable. This will at least fly to some degree to where it's useful, even if it's not directly into a headwind. So anyway, they had one of these guys. I'm like, well, I'm going to pick up a backup because I love that one that I have, and I need to have a couple overstable discs. So that was the first one I grabbed. The second one I grabbed is this sweet Leonardo Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle colored Mayhem plasma. And I have started throwing a lot more of these Mayhems for max distance because they just glide so far. And they turn over. They're very similar to me to a Insanity, but they're not quite as flippy. They're like a step just to the left as far as stability goes, but also have, obviously it's a speed like 13 or something, so they definitely get some extra distance too. But yeah, I really liked these, and I tend to throw these more than I throw my Insanities now. I still think they're sort of separate slots, but this is definitely my max distance disc right now. Let's grab that guy. The other disc that I relied on heavily in this tournament was Tesla. Because of the stability, it was just really nice into the wind. I could still trust it. When it got really windy, I could see it flipping a little, but they'd always come back. And I've just really started to love these Teslas. I got I got 4 of them in my Gyropalooza pack, and have absolutely loved them. And so I just snagged this plasma to go with. I have a couple other plasmas, a pink and a copper one. And I snagged this kind of green and gray one that they had to go with those because I just love these discs. Can't have enough of them. And the last disc I snagged was a sweet Prism Pyro in a green, which doesn't look nearly as green on this camera, but it's super neon green, and I absolutely love this disc. This is my 3rd Pyro now. They finally pushed the runway out, and I'm a Pyro guy now for sure. And I, again, relied very heavily on this in the wind on that second round. So yeah, very happy with my haul. Very happy with the tournament overall. I can't tell you enough how much you need to try this if you've been, on the fence. It was a blast, and I can't wait to go back again. I'm sad that I did it so late in the season. I mean, with COVID, that was sort of a requirement, but I really wished I had started doing this years ago. Um, because now I've done one, and they're essentially the tournaments are more or less done for the year. I mean, there's obviously winter tournaments, but winter disc golf is a whole other beast. Um, but yeah, now I can't wait until next season to really start hitting these hard and playing a lot more tournaments because it was just a blast. So, I guess if you have any other tips or comments or things that you want to add that I can incorporate into my tournament play moving forward, feel free to drop a comment below. Otherwise, if you want to go ahead and hit subscribe, I'm hoping to put out some more content. It'll probably be a little bit more infrequent this winter just because in Minnesota it's other than winter disc, which I'm not entirely sure how much I want to try to record in those conditions. Um, I maybe do a couple videos on some accessories. Like I'll talk about this, heater thing if it works out. I've got the friction glove now, which I'm going to try out and see how that works this winter. Um, so there might be some content this winter, but mostly next year I'm going to really try to put out some videos, do some reviews, some discs, um, and just try to get some more content out there, especially for the MVP stuff. There's not as many people out there pushing MVP. So it'd be really nice to be able to show off some of the plastic for people. Yeah, so I think that's all I've got. And until next time, I guess we will see you guys.